Hello and welcome to a TvZ best of 3 with my casting companion Apollo. Not the caster, the cat. He's being too darn cute, and I think everyone will enjoy having him in the game. And if you don't, well, I don't care. He's too cute. So I hope you enjoy the series, and I hope you enjoy the cat cam while Apollo stays around. In the bottom right of Blackburn, it is uThermal. And in the bottom left, it is solar. So a little crossover action. Probably played on North America Central, then West, then Central, if I had to guess. I believe this is from the Warty TV like holiday invitational or something along those lines. It is a best of 3 played back in the in January. So absolutely still recent enough because StarCraft doesn't change very much. You know, I was actually thinking about this while catching up in Valorant and other esports. And I was just thinking, you know, I know it's all cool to have updates. No argument there. Keeps people coming back. Keeps the game fresh. It is also kind of nice to have a game that you can go back to and know that it hasn't changed all that drastically. Shout out to the Wings of Liberty players that are finally getting back into Legacy of the Void. You guys are heavily disagreeing, like, what the hell, it's so different. But you know what I mean. You know, Valorant has 2 new champions within 2 months or something, and it's just, it totally changes everything. For StarCraft 2, it's all dependable. Most of the time when, you know, the Battle.net servers aren't down. So, same map pool, same meta. uThermal, very interesting player, might not be playing in the meta. You might do something a little bit off, like MECH, for instance. uThermal's the guy who's gonna try and experiment with MECH in a TvZ. Is he gonna do it cross-server? Maybe. That's actually more of a reason to do MECH versus a Zerg player, as it requires, let's be real, just a little less APMs, a little less micro. Doesn't actually require that split-second micro that, you know, splitting away from banelings do. So we might get to see it. But is he going to do it versus solar? Also, yes, he might. There's really no reason why uThermal, based on his history, just won't change things up. And in fact, especially because it's crossover, and especially because he might actually be seeing this as a bit more of a David and Goliath story than you would expect. I don't think it's actually that crazy of a skill difference, especially because solar has been, at times, hot and cold. 70% of the tournament looking freaking amazing, like he's gonna win the whole thing. Then last 30%, not so good. So I don't think this is... It kind of depends on where solar is at, I suppose. But uThermal, little spiky because of the way that he can play. Is going for a typical 3cc build, so really the opposite of interesting or unique. It's very in meta. Very normal thing is assuming we're also going to see... Oh, maybe not. Assuming we're going to see the bio follow-up to it, but this actually might be MECH. Very quick third gas coming down. Oh, no, it's a second. I got bamboozled, just like he's hoping to bamboozle solar. Classic. Nope, second gas. Never mind. So, I was going to say I would expect this to go into bio. Just because when you do see MECH, it is often accompanied by, well, a battlecruiser opener. I will say one thing for the timing of this replay. It was before the Last Chance tournament. And the Last Chance tournament's where we saw Maru and Cure? One other Terran, right? Bring out a couple of MECH builds. And that was kind of our first glimpse back into what could be a standard MECH play. Didn't actually come to be that way. Heading into mid-February, we've seen very little MECH outside of that and the day of Super Tournament. But hey, it's there. So I don't know if uThermal is experimenting with MECH now. Made all surprised. A lot of people do tend to copy the best Terran player, and that is Maru right now. But we do have that stim on the way. Overlord, I think it just barely saw that was spinning. Oh, it barely didn't. Barely didn't. Okay, so the stim is not known about. Neither is the tech lab, actually. This could look like a 1-1-1, and for all you know, the tech lab's on the starport, and it's building a battlecruiser. So that is... kind of sucky for Solar, who really could have had the 100% full scout if the Overlord had lived just for 2 seconds longer. As it is, I think a lot of things can be guessed correctly. Again, especially with this being before kind of the temporary visits of MECH. It's like the friend you only see once every 10 years and you go out to party and you have a good time, but then they just disappear to who knows where. Yeah, that's what MECH did. So I'm gonna guess Solar is thinking 100% that it was a third CC. You know, there's not a lot of barracks already on the way. There was nothing at the front, nothing quickly at the front, I should say. When you go for a third CC, your supply depots aren't necessary on the front lines as fast. And yeah, there's a lot of things that these professional Zergs can pick up with the barest of hints. So 1-1 is on the way. Lair, Bailey Nest 2. There is really no need to get super fast into this. It also wasn't a Banshee build, which has become evident as time has gone on. It was a Viking into a Liberator, so there's not even a reason to push for, say, an Overseer. You do still have to be careful about dealing with the multi-pronged harassment. Queens are going to go deal with the Liberator, decide that blocking the Hellions is a better plan, but they can only block from one base at a time. That natural was safe. The third base, not so much. 16 drones go down. A decent amount of Lings as well, as that Hellion number is just too great. And in fact, those Hellions are looking to make an escape, but the body block from the Queens yet again is going to at least give Solar the satisfaction of completely destroying the Hellion presence, and maybe a little bit of a counterattack could happen as uThermal is still transitioning over into those Marines. It's not that many Lings left over. That's another big reason why it was so important that the Hellions did what they did at the last second. They killed so many Lings. Because if they hadn't and then also gotten destroyed, there's a lot of trouble on this third base. My co-caster's gonna leave me now. Bye-bye, Apollo. So, fortunately, just enough Marines with a potential SCV pool to stop a very small number of Lings, with no upgrades yet, too, from doing any damage. uThermal did add on, I was gonna say, 5 barracks already, so this is pretty quick into additional 2. And actually, it's a bit odd he's going into 7 barracks in total. It's usually 8. Okay, there you go. There it is. You know, the 8 racks off of 3 bases. There's a reason we keep saying an 8 racks, not because we're bad at counting barracks. It's actually what it is. So 8 barracks, 1 factory, and 1 starport with upgrades is what you can afford off of 3 bases, and it is going to put you, let's say, in a very dedicated position, if not straight up all in. You aren't really supposed to continue on from this. Big reason why you can't continue on from this if you are pushed back is that you don't have, well, a very strong economy, right? Your 4th base isn't on the way very quick at all. And you also don't have a lot of splash. So you're working off of 1 factory. It's going to be a bit tough to start pushing back what could be large swells of Zerglings or Roaches or whatever we're up against. Right now, though, the earlier parts of TvZ is absolutely in the Terrans' court right now. The ball's in their court. They have the push potential before Solar's really ready to go. This one being particularly good behind this gold base, something that all Zerg players on Blackburn have to be wary of. In this case, if it was a drop, you know, you could deal with it perhaps. With it being the entire army, there was really nothing much that Solar could have done. Yeah, he would have had to have been prepared to handle that prior to the army making it that far to the gold, so. So the real push now coming, the one that gets really scary, that could snowball throughout this game. The next kind of power spike for the Terran is going to be that 2-2 finishing, and that is usually one of the last times they also get to have a say in this game. It's kind of do or die if the 2-2 timing doesn't kill the Zerg, unless it's been that kind of perfect game where it just does enough damage, just enough, then the Terran can oftentimes tap out. But already killing a gold base, already throwing Solar off, dealing with the run-by potential very well as well. uThermal does seem to be doing one of the better iterations of this push. Now, Solar was quick to identify this, I think, even though he missed the... Oh, well, he missed the initial 8th barracks. He scouted it pretty quickly afterwards. Didn't go for any additional tech as far as a Spire, which is not what we're seeing anyways from Zergs, but still. And didn't try and get into Hydras. It's just been all Ling Bailing. Now being able to come in here and take a pretty good fight. So those Marines on the right side, they're going to try their best to snipe the Banelings, of which they do, but the tanks were gone as the Marines off to the left side were goners. Solar setting up quite the surround, off of creep too, to be able to push that back a little bit, but that's really, you have to be so careful as the Zerg player when that happens, you know, pushing off of creep to begin with. You have to be so careful about that. Lots of extra opportunities for the tanks to get shots, lots of more opportunity for the Marines to split, and also a lot more opportunity for the Terran to chase down some of the straggling units, right? Fortunately, Solar really did take quite a good fight, was able to evacuate with the rest of his army pretty quickly too, but it still comes down to the fact that the Terran is just flooding the map with Marines, almost in a Zerg-like way when they 8 racks. They're going to have a lot more consistent pressure than you might expect. And all it takes is one bad fight from the Zerg player for them to be down on Banelings or have completely used up all of their Banelings to actually lose the game. Because even though they have a little bit of time to try and replace the Banelings, it's just, the Marines snowball so quickly. uThermal has decided to try and go into the later stages of TvZ. 4th CC does come down. You do get to start at 3-3, even if you weren't going to go for a 4th CC. So that's not usually an indicator that things have moved past the 8 racks point. The 4th CC is usually more so that indicator, but going back to the weakness of such a position, uThermal's not going to have a lot of splash. Right now he does have 3 tanks and a couple of Liberators. Not that Liberators splash, but 3 tanks, not the scariest thing to deal with. Looks like 2 bases are sacrificed as Solar takes the very safe approach, keeps his army alive, gets those ultras added on, waits for their upgrades as well, and that's fine for him. A 5th or 6th, whatever you want to call it, was been placed down, has been mining too, so it's not like he was thrown into the Dark Ages as far as the economy goes. But uThermal can feel a little bit better about trying to transition out of this game by killing at least 2 bases. Now uThermal's worry is, again, still the splash to a degree. There's still a lot of Ling Baneling to cover, but also dealing with ultras, so that's usually where we see a lot of Marauders added on. And, you know, the 8 racks, it's going to be a lot of Marines, and that's why you can afford 8 barracks worth. You do eventually add Tech Lab to those 3 barracks, start building Marauders, 100 minerals a pop instead of 50. That's expensive. It's pricey, so you need to be acknowledging, at the very least, that this first fight could be difficult. uThermal tries to take the fight while he can. His Marines are able to stack up for a while without having to run away, but now they have to run away. Well, fortunately, oh no, there was a couple of Banelings. Oh no, uThermal wasn't paying attention. I just kind of missed the Banelings were there, but he was actually focusing on the drop to the left side that was going to kill, I guess, a decent number of drones. 18 drones have gone down in this game. If Sola didn't have those 2 Banelings, then uThermal does this drop and holds pretty brilliantly back at home, because that looked like it was just going to be Lings for a while. Nope, couple of Banelings snuck on in there, able to take down at least a fair few of the Marines. Solar stabilizing it again on 4 bases, clears up the drop as uThermal was paying attention yet again, kind of the wrong place at the wrong time. This one he should be able to pick up, yeah. And not only is he trying to multitask and drop in multiple locations, uThermal's also trying to macro as well as he possibly can. So apparently one of the first 4th CCs, I thought this was the first one actually, turned into a planetary. And this is the 5th. That's a very interesting decision, but regardless, he's managed to afford a mostly maxed army consistently while expanding, while tech swapping as well, getting those goes, adding on those tech labs for the Marauders, all off the back of what is supposed to be a very dedicated 8 racks push. So a successful transition has been had that is often difficult to do. Solar might be able to get to Broodlords at some point. It's not a Greater Spire yet. Corruptors are on the way. They could come into play eventually. Right now, they're only being made for this Liberator problem, which can sometimes not look all that impactful if it's trying to focus down Lings. Who cares? Liberators, not anti-Ling units, right? They're anti-Ultra units. But should they actually get the shots off on the Ultras that are kind of leading the charge, which they usually are, then the Ultras, they get obliterated pretty darn quickly. So the Liberator field here is intimidating to the Zerg player. Either Vipers to abduct them, take them out of the equation, which he does have a couple of Vipers, or Corruptors to straight up go after them, get enough Corruptors to one-shot them, micro the Corruptors a little bit, have them glide a little bit, right? And they're going to take down Liberators. Hopefully easy enough. That's where the Ghosts come in to counter them as well. So Ghosts going to be able to snipe down those Ultras as well as the Corruptors. Of course, EMP the Vipers or snipe them is always the preference if you can kill something that is better than just getting rid of its energy. We got ourselves a good old-fashioned late-game TvZ. uThermal has managed to get up to 5 bases. Extra command centers on the way. Solar also managing to finally get in this 5th base at the gold for being denied so many times. And the 6th base is on the way too, so he does need to kind of make up for a bit of lost time as far as the Zerg's perspective goes, right? They always want to have that economy very strong to be able to sacrifice lots and lots of units, which Solar's getting to that point. Lings and Banelings attempting to find some type of weakness. Don't find very much a weak position at all. Planetary tank and the army there, but this is the distraction. Nice from the main base. uThermal was not paying attention. Doesn't have too many units coming out as well from these barracks to even stop it had he last second noticed. He was actually maxed out, so that is a bit of a problem. Now Lings flooding in here. Fortunately for uThermal, there aren't any lurkers. That is the real test of multitasking, means we have to clear up lurkers in your main base, but Lings and Ultra is still a big problem. A lot of the army has to come back, potentially taken away from the front lines. In this case, it seems to be a pretty good situation for uThermal. I was going to say a good split, but it was most of his army. There might have been a weakness somewhere else. Unfortunately for Solar, doesn't actually find the weakness particularly quickly or even that weak. This planetary was helped by a tank. It was helped by a quick pull on the SCVs by the looks of things, and that was supposed to be a little bit more of a 1-2 potential. It kind of was a half nothing kind of thing. So uThermal doing a great job so far, but Solar, I think he's kind of just like ramping up at this point. Now that he's situated on these bases, he can start to experiment a little bit more, trying to push and pull the Terran out of position. So another Nidus from the main base, just a little bit away from the single Marauder left at home. Once again, uThermal maxed out as well. Is not going to have many reinforcements. So as he commits to the front line, it's going to be a long time before he returns home. And that Nidus worm, I mean, it can be seen as a gamble. Oh, and it's actually not even going to be... Oh, no, it is going to work. It is going to work. It can be seen as a gamble if you actually put things into the Nidus Worm from the Zerg player's perspective. All it takes is a Nidus Worm and a handful of Lings coming out to still be a real bother. So absolutely still worth it. For as cheap as the Nidus Worms are in this game, maybe, you know, they're still cheap. They're still cheap. But Solar has been losing bases. It's not like he's on 10,000, 10,000, just here, have whatever you want. He does need to be a little careful with what he puts on the map. He loses that base. Both of them starting to bank a decent amount. Solar still holding strong at 83 drones. Remember that gold base that he has right now, relatively fresh because he was denied it for so long. Same, well, uThermal, I guess, has been forced to pull those SCVs away for so often. So the gold bases, you know, they make the economies look really steady. They make these numbers look really large. Solar actually almost 3,000 right there. They are eventually going to run dry faster than the other bases. And then with the map still split, we're talking about one extra base on each of their map side. And then you get into the interesting dynamic of these 6 o'clock and 12 o'clock bases. Who can actually control those? But regardless of the map, talked a lot about that. Let's talk about the units that are about to come out. Broodlords from Solar already created, more on the way, still properly protected by a couple of Vipers. Not that many Corruptors, but it's very rare for a Terran player to actually try and go in Vikings. Usually that's a very, very, very late game scenario. Is when Terrans try to have Vikings against Broodlord Viper, I guess. Oh, the Planetary didn't die! Oh no! Just a couple of Banelings short. I'm pretty sure Solar thought that was gonna die. Because I'm not sure it was worth pulling back the set of units there to keep them alive. As there weren't that many that survived. I'm pretty sure he wanted to actually kill that planetary, but not able to do so. uThermal, once again, perhaps with a quick pull, able to hold on to a base. And that's not just holding on to a base for the economy, that's still being able to depend on that attack path for having a defense. You know, if that dies and uThermal doesn't place a planetary lickety-split, then that's a whole attack path that is now open for Solar to abuse, where now it's a little bit more of a heads-up opportunity. uThermal can move to the top side of the map and engage the army, engage the gold base, as well as think, okay, I have time to respond to potentially an attack there, which is exactly what's happening. uThermal is going to have to come back home because by the looks of things, this is now officially going to go down. uThermal even acknowledging it. It's going to pull those SCVs away. There it goes. There it goes. But good save on the SCVs. A command center I just finished right next to it, so easy peasy replacing the planetary. Didn't even notice he had such a forward planetary here too. Just about, again, denying or allowing time to respond to these attack paths. Solo's got a nice room up here, I think, for the longest time. I think it's been here for a while. Burrow as well in effect, so gotta be careful about that. We do have a couple of Vikings being made now as uThermal acknowledges the problem, acknowledges the composition too. Which Vikings, ooh, they get into a tricky place, man. So, absolutely, earlier on, you're not gonna see a whole lot of Vikings from a Terran player. They're gonna want to go with the Ghost first and foremost, because they don't have a lot of starports usually. Not until they know it's Broodlords. But they could eventually add on starports, could eventually add on Vikings, play basically even Viking Liberator Ghost for the most part. What can still happen is that Vikings look useless. It's great that you got to them. They're not necessarily great units. They're not necessarily the hard counter. Technically, they're the hard counter to Broodlords, because Broodlords don't shoot up, but if we're giving the Zerg any sort of credit, they have Corruptors, they have Vipers, they have Infestors. Hell, they might even have Queens. Absolutely. That are going to support those Broodlords, and all of those things the Vikings find trouble against. Now, Vikings have pretty much one thing, maybe kind of two things, but their biggest advantage compared to the other anti-air air units, right, is that they have really good range. So that their micro potential can be seen as quite high. It's a high skill ceiling. The problem is to get the best out of their micro, they usually have to clump. Once they clump, the spellcasting units of the Zerg are brutal. But then there's the ghosts, EMP, the spellcasters. You know, there's still a lot of back and forth. There's counterweights to everything in StarCraft. But we'll see if the Vikings actually get to play their part that we usually expect them to. It's not surprising when you see Terrans just refuse to go Vikings, because they've had too many bad games, man. Too many bad games. This is turning into quite the game too, by the way. I was absolutely not expecting this. uThermal has absolutely engaged in late game TvZ, and by being the occasional mech player, one of the rare occasional mech players that kind of defaults you to a late game situation. I'm not totally surprised to see this happen. I do pin him as if he's playing bio to be more of a engagement momentum based player. You know, once he loses control of the situation, he doesn't necessarily find it the best game, the most fun game to play with super late game. But I know a lot of Terrans have basically looked to Maru again and said, well, you know what? I'm not going to say that I can do it just because he does it. I do think that there's some things that he's doing that I can start replicating. We got a big battle happening outside of the nuke range, so no explosions this time for Solar, but this battle for uThermal is looking awfully weird. Snipes are starting to go down, but not that many of them as the Broodlings contact the Ghost. They cancel the snipes. Banelings start to come in as well, and uThermal is forced to completely disengage after what was quite the little battle there. Lots of spells going down. It looks like the Broodlords, for the most part, injured, but alive. How many went down? 4 compared to 15 ghosts in this game. So I don't think all 15 ghosts died right then and there. It still was probably, yeah, definitely not a necessarily even trade for that particular battle. It is TvZ though, and we expect Solar to be losing out on resources lost. It would be really nice for uThermal if he was losing out even more. You know, a 10,000 resource difference is not out of the question for a Zerg player to still be winning. So for it to be only 6,000, it's, you know, it's good, but kind of also in the norm. uThermal, I want to see another nuke. Just throwing it out there. Not because it's Solar, it's because nukes are cool. uThermal, instead of getting a nuke, it's a really nice, just simple old run by to the top side of the base. You know, at this point, I don't even necessarily know if it's about getting your own base up here. Okay, he was going to try to. As much as it can also be just making sure your opponent doesn't get it, so it just stays fresh minerals for an extended period of time. But uThermal was thinking about it. He might even turn this into a planetary. Yeah, he is. And then have another base come forward just so he can get the defenses up and running as fast as possible. This hatchery denying it for 5 seconds is something he didn't actually want to deal with, obviously. He could have waited 5 seconds, planted it down there, and then turned it into a planetary, but that's 5 more seconds for Solar to come in before planetary is ready, you know? I'm guessing that's what uThermal was focusing on. Now, at this point, with the whole army of solar coming over here, this planetary is not going to hold. But if it takes the whole army to go there, then of course uThermal is absolutely in the right to attack down the south. Really playing the positional game on Blackburn. Excellent EMP on the majority of the infestors, but all it takes is a couple of fungals for that air army to be decimated. So it's a start. It's a start for the Terran side of things. Looks like a lot of Marauders were able to survive what was left over Ling, Baneling, Ultra that was trying to attack into that planetary. Marauders perfect for that situation. All relatively healthy. Medevacs are low, and the Broodlords are coming over to stop it. But every time the Broodlords start to inch to the north, uThermal could arguably try and reach towards the south. And by the way, uThermal, his little pit stop on Vikings was short-lived. The Vikings, did they die? Well, half of them died, and then 2 were left over. Probably, like I'm saying, realizes, you know what, I don't want to play with that. I don't want to play with that. I don't want to risk that. Let's go a different path. And it's going to go into Mass Thor, which is often just a very difficult transition because there's not that many factories, even in late game TvZ, but it's also not exactly the super dependable army. It's, again, not a hard counter, but it is powerful. I mean, I'm very interested in seeing how this plays out against the still growing Broodlord army, because I think that's also really important about potentially going into those Thors. Is it truly an air army from the Zerg, or are they still transitioning? Are they still 10 Broodlords, 10 Ultras on the ground? Or are they 20 Broodlords with barely anything on the ground, right? So in that sense, with it being so very much focused on the air, I think I like the Thor. I think I like what is now basically a mech transition. So we had 3 factories for a while in this game. Then I think added 2 more. I want to say maybe it was 1, then 4 additional. That's what I'm reading right now. Okay, so be it. But that is basically a mech transition, very Brood War-esque. Just because in StarCraft 2 you very rarely have Terran transition at all. Brood War mech to bio and vice versa is a little different, but shan't get into that. Double command center going to be taken down. That's a big loss for uThermal. We're at the point now where they've traded a lot, so it's not that they're banking 10,000 minerals and gas. They've also mined a lot. That makes sense, right? But because they mined a lot, you know, we're talking about very limited resources just as we think about mining out the map. We are thinking about that possibility, about what would happen if legitimately the map is mined out. So, you know, don't want to be losing 800 minerals worth just for, well, nothing. It was nothing. It was just a mistake. It was just a bad timing. I do think this 6 o'clock base is a lot more realistic. It's where uThermal has placed a lot of his army. It's where he's also been pushing in through a lot of the time. But, you know, it's yin and yang right now. Solar gets the top side, uThermal gets the bottom. Both of them with very slow compositions at this point. I guess uThermal is a bit faster. Broodlords are super slow. But still, overall slow. There's 2 things that can happen, right? Blackburn, a map that kind of naturally encourages just moving into each other. Big battles. They could also go into a base trade. I don't think we're going to have that. Lots of EMPs going down is nice. Only a couple of fungals left over. The Vipers, I think one of them also got hit there. So very, very limited on the number of spells used in this upcoming battle, and uThermal knows he wants to push the issue. It transforms the Thors. I think they were mistakenly in splash mode to begin with, but now we have an issue for the Thors against the Broodlings on the ground. They're great against the Broodlords. They are 100% good against Broodlords, but they need that cover. They need something, most likely Hellbats, in front of them to tank the Broodlings. Not even just because of the damage the Broodlings do, but because that actually immobilizes them. They're so busy trying to get through the damn Broodlings, the AIs having difficulty deciding what it should do. You try to control them, they just get body blocked. And you really need to actually get that out of the equation. So uThermal, of course, and mech players have been saying, very familiar with mech, even though it's mostly a bio meta, probably just is thinking that it's not as necessary if everything is in order, which is also an interesting approach. I mean, I think he'd know that usually it's about spamming Hellbats right now, just getting as many out as possible, so up to 10, 15. He's not doing that, and not just because he's maxed out. He could have done a couple more Hellions instead of a couple more Ghosts, but now everything is really necessary. He needs the Ghosts, he needs the Hellbats, he needs the Thors, and he still needs, I would say, a couple of Liberators. Maybe the Liberator is actually the camp that he could sacrifice. Or maybe he should sacrifice 15, 20 SCVs. I think he might. I honestly believe that the lack of Hellbats could kill him. Maybe he loses the battle regardless of that, but that especially. Or, yeah, he thinks that maybe the Ghosts will help and the Liberators will help out enough. I don't know, that's Terra, it's, oof. Those units aren't, they're not splash, basically. And while Hellbats aren't splash enough for a lot of situations, they are still splash, so that, I don't know. Fusion Core's on the way, we never got that beforehand? So many upgrades, and yeah, no Liberator range. All right, then. Things have really calmed down. uThermal, having been slapped a little bit in the last engagement, I think is most understandably afraid to engage. Solar, also understandably afraid to engage, because he knows that all it takes a couple of EMPs, Thor is actually connecting with these Broodlords, for him to lose the engagement. That is absolutely possible. 14 Thors versus 23 Broodlords. If the Thors were appropriately covered and we're not accounting for spellcasters, Thors would win that. But spellcasters do make a lot of difference. The lack of fodder for the Thors is a big problem, so on and so forth. Even the lack of the Liberator range was truly a problem, because if he is depending on a Liberator Ghost Thor composition, that's it, that's the composition. You probably want to have that Liberator upgrade. So, I would not be surprised at all if uThermal is still kind of experimenting with this style. And the next time we see him do this, he gets to the Liberator range super, super quickly. But we have the EMPs go down again. This time not as juicy, I believe. Oh, actually, kind of equally as juicy. One Viper lost its energy, a bunch of Infestors. This command center was bold. It was bold. To say the least. It's a lot of creep spread, but I like the idea. I like the potential. Honestly, stealing minerals and gas from your opponent's side of the map, also what we're talking about in a game like this. 32 minutes, an engagement possibly going to come here. Couple of Vikings trying to help out. Still nothing in front of these Thors. Also, the EMPs did not come down this time, so the Blinding Clouds wrecking the Thor's chances to take on those Broodlords. The Liberators not really doing the best job possible in cleaning up those Liberators and now dying to the Corruptors, and uThermal just taps out, realizing that was not going at all the way that he was hoping. Well freaking played, though. Quite the TvZ, almost 32 and a half minutes. And we got to see a little bit of a mech to, or bio to mech transition, sorry, which is super rare in StarCraft 2. I love the ideas. I always love uThermal's creativity, but it can be difficult to make work. Solar is also a very intimidating late game opponent. Without a good old juicy nuke, this guy wins a lot of late games. But let's go into game 2 and see what happens there.